Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second of 3 sessions in our cocktail series. My name is Tally Veron. I'm the founder and publisher at the Soapbox Press, and I'm so excited to be your host this evening. Tonight and next Thursday, we're going to be putting the spotlight on two brilliant authors, Cindy Aronson and Tamara Herman, in anticipation of their brand new novel, Jagged Edge. Tonight, we'll be talking about mental health and have also invited mental health professional Yana Kreminska to share her expertise with us. Before we go any further, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that although we are gathering in a virtual space, the Soapbox Press rests on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We encourage you to learn the history of the land you are currently on as we reflect on the past and acknowledge the changes that can be made going forward in the process of truth and reconciliation. In a few short moments, we'll be welcoming Cindy, Tamara, and Yana to the stage to really get this party started. But before we do, let's take care of a bit of housekeeping. The first 30 minutes of the event will be what promises to be a lively discussion with Cindy, Tamara, and Yana as we discuss all aspects of mental health and body image as they relate to Jagged Edge and the experiences of the authors. When we reach the Q&A portion of the event, which will take place during the last 15 to 20 minutes, we'll invite you to use the raise hand function if you'd like to ask a question to the authors directly. We'll then turn on your mic so you can speak. You're also welcome to use the Q&A box to ask your question. And when you send a question through the Q&A, you can also send it anonymously if you'd like. If you'd like to chat with other attendees or with the authors or myself, use the chat box throughout the event. Just make sure that if you're leaving a message that you would like everyone to see, that you select to all panelists and attendees. And if you'd like it just to go to the panelists, then make sure that it sends to all panelists. Lastly, this event is closed captioned, so to enable closed captions, just press the closed captions button at the bottom of your screen. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce Cindy, Tamara, and Yana. Cindy Aronson has been supply teaching in Toronto for over 2 decades, allowing the freedom to advocate for her 2 sons who struggle with ADHD and social anxiety. After an often challenging childhood that saw her spending many years as the primary caregiver for her ailing mother, Cindy learned that creative writing was a powerful outlet to release her own stress. Cindy enjoys writing that reflects both the darker and comedic facets of her persona. Several of her poems have been published in various local anthologies. Jagged Edge is her first full-length novel. Tamara Herman spent over 20 years teaching English literature and music in secondary schools in Toronto before fully turning her attention to writing. Aside from writing, she devotes much of her time advocating for her 2 sons, both of whom are on the autism spectrum. Due to her own struggles with mental health issues, Tamara uses her extensive knowledge, research skills, and enthusiasm for learning about the human psyche as the basis for much of her personal writing. Tamara has published several short stories, poems, and nonfiction works. Jagged Edge is her first full-length novel. Yana Kreminska has an MA in psychology from Kam'янets-Podilsky National University, Ukraine. A graduate of the Ukrainian Institute of Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, she practiced cognitive and behavioral therapy and schema therapy approaches with adults and children for over 6 years. She worked at the Ukrainian Catholic University's Mental Health Institute, as well as in private practice, assisting individuals with various mental health issues. Having recently moved to Canada, Yana is currently working on applying to become registered with the College of Registered Psychotherapists of Ontario. So now I would like to welcome all of our panelists. Hi, Yana.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm excited to be here.
That's so good to hear. Hi, Tamara and Cindy. Oh, yes, we're all holding the book. How are you two doing?
Do that again, because that, like, you see the light through it. Look, everything matches purple.
That's right.
And we made sure to make this a balanced drink, a balanced meal, because we've got the fruit salad included.
Well done, well done. That is perfect for a Thursday night. So, I mean, maybe that's where we should start. This is the cocktail series.
Okay, I'll start.
Why don't you tell us what you are drinking?
Oh, here. So, with respect
Work with
for
this now.
So with respect for the content today, we decided to call this drink "Call Me Crazy Baby," and it's because it's like kind of like a crazy mixture of a lot of different things. But Cindy put it best when she described what it tastes like.
Like a grape icicle.
Freezy.
Freezy. Sorry, grape freezy.
That's so good.
Yes, it is.
Sadly, I'm just drinking my red wine, but I'm also enjoying it, so it's not that sad. But
And as Cindy mentioned before, it's the main ingredient that matters.
Yes.
Alcohol.
this is true. Well, I'm so happy that we're all gathered here tonight. So why don't we just get started? So before we dive into our discussion, Tamara and Cindy, do you want to give us a quick synopsis of Jagged Edge to catch anyone up to speed who didn't attend last week?
Oh, sure. So just briefly, it is our first full-length novel that we've written. Jagged Edge is really an exploration of two individuals in the city of Toronto who have really tragic pasts, but they have and they are still working to overcome those tragedies, and they find each other and are immediately drawn to each other. This is the main characters, Lily and Ryder. I think what's important to note is that they have a very symbiotic and very sort of secret connection that only one of the two of them actually knows, and that will play into the development of their relationship and potentially destroy it as well.
Well said.
Thank you.
Very well said. So as we all know, tonight we're going to be talking specifically about the aspect of mental health and body image that really play into the novel. And that's why it's so great that we have Yana here today, who will be able to provide kind of the clinical and factual perspective to the creative way that you represented these issues in the novel.
Absolutely, and I'm really thankful that Yana, you could be here with us.
You.
It's, I mean, we can only talk from experience of rather than from a more clinical perspective. So
yeah.
Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. So why don't we get started? So kind of we got a taste of this a little bit in the synopsis that we heard of Jagged Edge. So Lily and Ryder are flawed and complex, but they're ultimately very lovable characters. And part of that comes from the detailed backstories that you gave them. And I know that we're going to spend a lot of time talking about Lily tonight, but I thought maybe we would start with talking about Ryder. So can you tell us a bit about Ryder, his backstory, and what inspired you to include his complicated relationship with his father?
Well, we referred to him in the book as her knight in shining armor. And I know that sounds cliche, but I think that that's kind of the character that we tried to create, a man that all women would fall in love with.
And yet, even though it follows that trope of the knight in shining armor, it's not the kind of novel where a woman relies on a man to save her.
Yes.
She saves herself, and
they save each other.
They save each other,
yes.
and essentially it's their growth together. I think that's one difference that sets this book apart from a lot of others in this the contemporary romance genre, is that we do focus a great deal on the male's perspective, influence, experience, reactions,
thoughts, feelings.
Yeah. And it's not just about the female.
And that was a very conscious effort. I remember our conversation about that, where we spoke at length about not only providing Lily's background and thoughts and feelings and experiences and perspective, but to provide Ryder's as well.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times, again, it's this genre and the traditional tropes. I think that men are often excluded from that. Now, in part, it's because the readership is predominantly female, but even so, as a woman, I really want to know what men are thinking and feeling. And as citizens sort of in a modern and global society that we have right now, where mental health is not a taboo to discuss any longer. I think it's just as vitally important for men to be able to identify and discuss mental health issues as much as it is for women. It's not just a female issue.
Absolutely.
I think, yeah, that's a great way to put it. And it really comes through in the book too, because we see that Ryder is also struggling with a lot, and it really shapes who he is and then the growth that he undergoes by the end of the book.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So I also realized that we shouldn't give too much away because, of course, we don't want to spoil anything for our future readers. So I'll apologize now for going to be a little bit vague, and hopefully we'll pique your curiosity just enough for you to pick up the book. So
you can get on the, you can pre-order it on the Soapbox Press website.
Yes.
Yes, and of course we'll share the link. So Lily is the novel's protagonist, and she has body dysmorphic disorder. And I think, again, a lot of our conversation tonight will be talking about BDD, especially because it's so rarely talked about. So before we really dive in, can you tell us what BDD is?
Yana, do you want to give the clinical definition?
Yeah, so I'll start. So according to DSM-5, which is a diagnostic statistic manual, that's where all the disorders are described. There are a few characteristics of BDD that define it as a disorder, rather than just preoccupation with your body image. So A is person has to be preoccupied with a perceived defect. What's important, that it's not a real defect that's visible and like everyone by just looking at someone can see it. So it's something that is really minor or even non-existent. Then criteria B is what we call compulsive or repetitive behavior. That's the way that people usually try to cope with the perceived flaw, or physical flaw. We're talking about physical appearance, and very often it's mirror checking, excessive grooming, skin picking, reassurance seeking from others, having others say that you're good, it's okay, no, I don't see, like stuff like that, or comparing your appearance with the appearance of other people, which really helps for a long period of time. It's a short-term reinforcement. Then C, what's important is that this preoccupation, it causes a lot of distress and interferes with functioning. And we're talking about hours during the day. I don't remember exactly, but I think it's at least 2 hours a day, but I think it's usually more. Can be 5 to 8 hours a day, or even longer, that people spend looking at themselves in the mirror and stuff like that. And also, what's important is that this preoccupation is not better explained by any other disorder, like anorexia or OCD. Sometimes it's So those make the BDD what it is.
Wow, that is so helpful. Thank you. And it actually, like, hearing that really contextualizes a lot of Lily in the book too. So thank you. Cindy, do you want to share, I guess, from your perspective?
Yeah, for me, it's all of those things. And as you were naming them, Yana, in my head, and it was check, yes, yes, yes. I mean, you've basically described the way my brain works. For me, in particular, there's a standard of perfection that, we all have our standards. And for me, in terms of my physical appearance, the standard is always perfection. And as we know, perfection doesn't exist. And so if you have that standard where anything less than perfection is not going to cut it, and you're constantly striving for that, you're constantly frustrated, you are constantly setting yourself up for frustration, for disappointment, and you internalize that, and it becomes low self-confidence and lack of self-esteem, and a preoccupation, a consistent preoccupation with your physical appearance. How do I look now? The wind just blew my hair. What happened? Does it still look okay? I'm feeling bloated. Everyone can see my stomach. And flaws that, as Yana said, no one else can see, aren't there, but are so exaggerated in my mind, it's all I can think about. And as you said, it is hours a day. And there are some days where I don't want to leave the house because I am so far from the perfection that I feel I cannot leave the house, that I'm just too unattractive to be seen. And I know I certainly don't see myself the way other people see me. I've been told that by my husband, by my friends, by my family, that, you know, they've used adjectives like, you know, attractive or pretty or beautiful. I cringe because that is just not how I see myself. And for years, I thought that I was just unattractive, that I was ugly, and I compared myself to my friends and to strangers and to whoever, and didn't understand that there was actually legitimacy to the way my brain was functioning, to the way that I was feeling, and just thought for years that I was just vain and selfish and egoistic, and that I was basically just a bitch because all I cared about was my appearance. And if I was stuck in that moment of not being able to move on because I was so far away from the perfection, that it was affecting my husband, my children, my siblings when I lived at home, my mother who I cared for. It made me feel like I was a horrible person. So knowing that there is actually a legitimate diagnosis and that it exists in the DSM, right? DSM
Yeah,
4?
five.
5? It's 5 now. It's been a while since I did my psychology degree. It has taken a weight off of my shoulders because now I understand that it's not me being a bad person. It's not me being selfish or a bitch or whatever else. There's something going on in my brain that's, you know, legitimate. And so that's been my experience since childhood.
Thank you for sharing that, Cindy. And I just want to ask if you would feel comfortable sharing, like, how did you realize for yourself that it was BDD rather than, I guess, what we're calling just like insecurity with body image?
Well, that's the thing. I realized that, you know, with reflection and talking to other people and observation over the years, that what I was experiencing was not what everybody else was experiencing. And that was like the trigger for like thinking there's something wrong. There's something going on here. This isn't normal. This isn't every woman's experience. And to be quite honest, years and years ago, I was watching, was it Chicago Hope? One of these medical, one of these hospital dramas. And there was a storyline about, it was a man, a woman, I'm pretty sure it was a woman who was suffering from, yes, it was a woman who was suffering from BDD. I'd never heard the term before. And her whole storyline was about this imperceived, the attaining of perfection. And she got her hands on a pair of scissors and ended up cutting off her whole head of hair, trying to get it even and trying to get it perfect, which just exacerbated the problem. And I remember thinking, although my experience wasn't exactly like hers, that term, that kind of got me thinking. And that's when I started researching and learning and figuring things out.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. So Yana, maybe can you tell us what is the difference, I guess, between body image issues, or I get like what is the difference between kind of having these thoughts and insecurities and then BDD? So how can someone tell the difference if they're experiencing these things?
Yeah. So I think, that we all have, I guess, certain areas that we don't feel comfortable about in terms of our body, our appearance. It's also changeable, right? Sometimes we feel okay, but then we gain a little bit of weight and then we don't feel okay anymore. Or but I think what differentiates BDD as a diagnosis from just feeling insecure or having body image issues is the amount of time and distress, and also having the checking all the boxes that we mentioned, right? Having all that repetitive behavior. But also I just wanted to mention that our appearance is an important part of our self-esteem. And according to research, according to studies, for women, it takes third place in their overall life satisfaction. And for men, it takes second place after financial satisfaction. So it's actually really high up in the hierarchy of our overall life satisfaction. For a lot of people, I should say, not for all of us, but for a lot of people. And I should also mention that it's changing over time, and there are a lot more people now who undergo minor surgeries or go for cosmetic surgeries. Then it's twice more people now than even a decade ago. So people pay a lot more attention to appearance, and I suspect, I can't really say for sure, but I suspect that this tendency will also mean that there will be more BDD. So right now the average rate is about 2%. But I think that what we see now with teenagers, that's when it usually starts, during the teenage years, but with teenagers being a lot more preoccupied with their image, with the way they look, and it being tied more to their self-esteem. And we see a lot more depression, suicide, self-harm in teenagers, a lot more actually. And it's tied to a lot to social media, as you can all guess probably. And also with COVID, I should mention that it's already estimated that us all being on camera all the time and seeing, ourselves closely and, on the screen, a lot of people really notice things that they don't like about it.
I want to interrupt you, but I just want to say this is very difficult for me. I see myself in the corner and I have to not look at myself right now, and it's great when other people are speaking because then I can focus on them, but it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And you just emphasize the point that that's what is happening. That's the tendency, because we all wonder what's going to happen after COVID. That's one of the things that people notice, and that's the tendency, the trend now in mental health, that people are more and more preoccupied by the way they look. And I think it's in terms of self-esteem and the way, like our body image and appearance, it's tied to our self-esteem, which is the system of beliefs that we have about ourselves, and about self-worth, whether I'm lovable or not. It's part of that. But if there's too much attention or too much emphasis on it, then it can become unhealthy and cause issues. I don't know if that explains.
No, that does. Thank you. Oh, my brain is going in so many different directions. And of course, I immediately thought of social media as well, especially when we're talking about teenagers and how we're always attached to our phones. And now with COVID, we're always online and on our computers. It's fascinating. And it also just made me think, I don't know if you know this, but even on Zoom, there's a feature in the video settings that it's like touch up how you look.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So it gives you a glow and it blurs you a little bit. So
I just want to add to it, that it's true with all the filters on Instagram and Zoom, like you said. People just spend more and more time trying to better the way they look and present themselves. So it's concerning.
Yeah, it's really crazy how it's being built into technology and the way we see ourselves. I don't know, very scary.
I think that one of the most important aspects that's been mentioned is about the obsessive nature of BDD, but just in general about certain mental health issues. They tend to focus on, a lot of them tend to focus on obsessive behaviors. So I don't have BDD, certainly not to any kind of extent like Cindy does. I don't like the way I look, but but my obsessions and my OCD go elsewhere. But I think what's really important, and Yana, you've mentioned this, and we all know this, is the inordinate amount of time that is spent preoccupied with obsessions and thoughts and separate from compulsive behavior, but the amount of time that is spent considering whether it's your appearance or your fears or whatever the issue is, it preoccupies such a majority of your day. It's exhausting.
Yes.
And I think that's the difference between, or a large part of the difference between, having poor self-esteem, or I'm not pretty enough, I'm not fat enough, or I'm not skinny enough, I'm too fat, and I can't look like this model or that model. The important part is about the amount of time that you spend so hyper focused on each little element. That's what's really horrifying about these mental health issues, which is why it's really important to try to seek out help for them. I mean, kudos to Cindy for being able to identify on her own that this is what she's experiencing. But the next step now is to be able to get help and stop trying to deal with it yourself, because it just takes up too much time, and it's too exhausting to exist like that.
Yeah. And that's where I am in my process.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is also, in many ways where Jagged Edge comes in, because prior to reading your book, I had, not that I'd never heard of BDD, I did. I studied psychology during my undergrad, but I had never encountered it too closely or kind of heard that first person account. And so when reading these experiences.
That's why, because there's a formula, right, to this type of book, like genre, like we said. And so when we were talking about the possible issues that Lily could be struggling with, I said to Tam, it would be really important to me if this is the issue we gave her, because most people don't even know what it is, let alone understand it or understand people who are struggling with it. And I really wanted to use this opportunity as a means to shed light on it.
Well, considering such a disproportionate number of the population does, especially females, do experience this.
Yeah. We thought it was relatable.
It is, but once again, it goes back to how to write. You have to write what you know. You have to write what you experience.
Yes.
And
it ended up being extremely cathartic for me, because I was able to talk about something that I never felt comfortable talking about, that I was ashamed to talk about for fear that people would judge me, not understand me. So it ended up being a wonderful platform to get it all out with someone who I knew that I could trust and who I was safe with. And it ended up being just a wonderful cathartic experience for me.
Absolutely.
I wonder if you would like to read us an excerpt that kind of speaks to this from the book.
I think that is the most opportune moment is to do that right now, because this details it 100%.
Yes, and we will warn you, this excerpt is a little bit longer than the ones we read last week, but there's a reason why, and once we read it, you'll understand why it was the length that it is.
Oh, glasses on.
Yes, glasses on. Okay. Imagine a beautiful young woman getting ready to go to a party. She would choose her clothes from her closet and get dressed. 5 minutes. She would wash and style her hair. 20 minutes. She might then put on her face, potentially anywhere from another 10 to 20 minutes. Total potential preparation time, between 35 and 45 minutes. Seems reasonable, right? Now, imagine a beautiful young woman with body dysmorphic disorder getting ready for that same party. She would choose her clothes from her closet and get dressed. Then she would get undressed and choose different clothes. Then she would undress and redress again and again, seeking to come as close to her unattainable vision as possible. 30 minutes to as much as an hour if she has to pilfer from friends, sisters, or mother's wardrobes as well. Washing of the body is an absolute, as long as she keeps her eyes closed during her shower to avoid looking at herself, and if it doesn't exceed more than the time required to become clean, 2 minutes. The hair is a different issue though. If the woman has the type of hair that is most manageable when it is squeaky clean, then it would be most definitely washed the day of the party, tacking on at least 2 more minutes to the shower for the shampoo and 2 more for the conditioner. If the woman has hair that styles better with myriad products and needs less frequent washing, then the previous 4 minutes from the shower can be excluded. However, the woman would still need 6 minutes to re-wet and reapply fresh product to the hair. Styling the hair is its own challenge. Once the product is applied, it needs time to set, 10 minutes. Makeup application could begin during this time if multitasking is possible. Once the hair is set, it needs to be dried and further styled. This is often an unknown factor. On a good day, it could be as little as 20 minutes. On a bad day, however, it could mean starting and restarting the hair, taking as long as an hour and 20 minutes. On a really bad day, the ensuing anxiety attack due to frustration with the hair will add at least another 30 minutes. Makeup application, if not already started, is diverse, multi-tiered, and similarly time-consuming. She would begin with moisturizer, followed by foundation. She would have to be careful to allow at least 10 minutes between the application of the moisturizer and the foundation so that the moisturizer has time to absorb into the skin. Otherwise, the foundation will become caked and greasy. She will set the foundation with a dusting of powder, 15 minutes. Heady concealer absolutely must go under the eyes, and indeed over much of the entire face, as she will confirm that every little mark, pimple, zit, scar, vein, or capillary is adequately covered, 5 minutes. However, as often happens, if the makeup has now become too thick, it must be completely removed and the process begun again, potentially another 30 minutes.
At this point, timing becomes more dependent on each specific woman's preference and desire for her aesthetics with respect to cosmetic choice. Many women opt for an unpretentious light dusting of eyeshadow. If not using any blending techniques, this process is fairly simple and might take only 2 minutes. But if symmetry is an issue, it may involve more time to balance each eyelid accordingly, between 2 and 5 minutes. Eyeliner, if used, is often the make or break factor of any woman's makeup routine. Incredibly difficult to apply in general, the woman must first decide whether she wants a pencil or a gel line, a thin line or a cat's eye, top only or top and bottom. Once these relatively quick decisions are made, the challenge is to apply the liner correctly and perfectly according to the vision in the woman's mind the first time. 10 minutes. Extra time, up to another 10 minutes, may be necessary to toy with the final shape. If too much toying occurs, however, the eye makeup will likely be removed and restarted. Luckily, mascara and brow color are relatively quick and simple, not requiring the same intensity of precision of application. Allow at least 30 seconds between coats, 3 coats minimum, total time, 4 minutes. Blush, if used, takes almost no time at all. As long as it's not too blatant, 30 seconds should do it. If the woman chooses lipstick over lip gloss, she needs to be prepared to spend at least 10 minutes applying, removing, and reapplying the liner and color. Another 2 minutes to repeat with a different color. Lip gloss is much simpler. In summary, the aggregate conceivable time just for makeup application between 47 minutes and 1 hour 44 minutes. Add all of those times together to approximate the total potential time for a woman with body dysmorphic disorder to get ready to go out. Minimum time of 1 hour, 53 minutes. Maximum time, 4 hours and 32 minutes. This is, of course, assuming that by the end of all the frustration, anxiety, time and effort spent, the woman is at the point where she feels satisfied enough to even be seen in public. In more extreme cases, when the woman, after all of this time and effort has been spent getting ready, is still not pleased, the entirety of this process will have been for naught, as she will remove her makeup, brush through her hair, take off her clothes, and crawl into bed instead.
I'm so glad that you read that entire passage, because I think it really puts, everything we've been talking about into perspective.
It's the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's realistic.
I know it's realistic.
She knows it's realistic. Like I said, I don't experience the same issues with BDD, even remotely, that Cindy does. My issues with mental health are on a sort of other end of the spectrum, and it really is a spectrum. I mean, most of these disorders, and Yana, you'll be able to speak better to this, but I think a lot of them are comorbid anyway. So, you know, you might have BDD, but part and parcel of that is obsessive compulsive disorder
and
or
anxiety
disorder.
Yeah.
They really do sort of infringe upon one another. One of, I think, the differences between Cindy and me is that I have been able to seek out help. It took me a long time both to get to that point, but also to even find somebody with whom I could spend sessions, because getting into the mental health environment in Ontario is very lengthy in terms of the time frame. I did find somebody. I've been with him, a psychiatrist, for several years. I still struggle with my own issues, and it's still exhausting, but at least I have someone like Yana from a very clinical perspective that I'm able to speak to about that and seek out professional help, I guess, and medication.
And I mean, I feel like, well, I have to ask just because I think it's an important question, and just so we get the perspective on when seeking out professional help, do you, Tam, and also Yana, have advice on kind of how to find a good fit for you in terms of a therapist or a psychologist or a counselor, and kind of where people should start that process?
Well, from my experience, I started cold calling, honestly, to psychiatrists. A lot of psychologists, they can't necessarily prescribe medication. And I suspected that my issues really did need more than just counseling. The problem is that a psychiatrist doesn't spend that time in counseling. The psychiatrist will prescribe medications, see how you're doing, check in once every 3 to 4 weeks or so. But the counseling isn't so much of a part of it. So I am missing that component. But I did start by cold calling public health agencies and getting myself on wait list after wait list after wait list, and calling nonstop. Just every week or so I would call again. And you really have to kind of self-advocate and kind of get pushy about it to some respects. If you do want faster, more immediate services, especially with respect to counseling, then you can really do a Google search in your area for psychologists or psychotherapists who do spend that time with you, not just to diagnose, but also to discuss the underlying issues behind why this is what it is, and then work on techniques to try to cope with some of the issues. I know that I've been on a wait list for well over 2 years now for a dialectical behavior therapy group for some of my issues, and I'm still waiting, but it is what it is, you know. And I do take my meds. I regularly check in, and I'm waiting.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I can't believe how long the wait times are, though.
It can be excessive, But again, if you're willing to pay for it, if you have insurance, that's great. But if you go to a psychologist or a psychotherapist, you will pay for it as opposed to a psychiatrist, which is OHIP covered. But again, you have to determine what it is you need. Do you need therapy? Do you need medication? Do you need a combination? So if you want more immediate services, then definitely seek out psychologists and psychotherapists in your area.
Thanks. And Yana, do you have any recommendations or suggestions of kind of where people can start when they're looking to seek treatment?
Yeah, I think I agree that sometimes it's a psychiatrist, sometimes it's a psychologist, psychotherapist, sometimes it's both. And I think a good specialist will be able to define whether it's a combination or whether, because some protocols recommend combining medication and psychotherapy treatment. And sometimes psychotherapy is enough, but it really depends on the case. And I think it's something that a regular person without education, specialized education, is not able to define or know for themselves. And I think it's, yeah, sometimes you need a good specialist to see a good specialist in order to be able to understand what you need and what your options are. And unfortunately, it doesn't always happen. Unfortunately, sometimes I've heard a lot from people that they went from a specialist to a specialist and to specialist, and there's a lot of frustration, and it's really, really sad, especially if the wait lists are so long here in Canada. It's a bit different in Europe, depends on the country as well. It's different in Ukraine. But yeah, the mental health is not covered here, and just like you mentioned that psychiatrists are covered by OHIP, but psychotherapy, psychologists are not, and people need to pay out of pocket, and not everyone is in a position to do that, and it's sad, and I think it's an issue. It's concerning. But when do people need to seek help? I think when they feel that, I think the quality of life is usually a criteria. If people feel that their quality of life is low or lower that it could be, then that's the reason to seek help.
If I may, I think it's really important to note here that if anyone who is listening or who will be viewing this later on, if you are experiencing issues, whether they're a mental health crisis or suicidal ideations or any kind of crises that you feel that you cannot cope with on your own, please go to a hospital. It's really important that you take initiative and advocate for yourself. You can go straight to a hospital if you're in a crisis, and a mental health team there at the hospital can come and see you and treat you on the spot. There are also suicide hotlines and help phone numbers that we should all know the phone numbers with, because you can call them. In Ontario, they will reach out. They can send out mobile teams to you if you are in an immediate crisis. So,
yeah, there are resources available, and we should use them, because we shouldn't put ourselves in a situation where we deny ourselves the help that we need. And there's no shame ever in asking for help.
No, and I've used them for my kids before. We've had a couple of issues with crises in our house with their kids, and I've called for services, and within hours a mobile team was here. Follow-up was incredible. So there are those resources. You may not be able to get long-term service right away, but there are immediate services that you can access.
And we'll try to send out some of those services to everyone who's attended.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, just because we don't have them on hand. So we will definitely do that. So as we're slowly approaching 8 o'clock, I invite everyone who's here. It's only 7:47, so we have time. But we've been talking a lot, and I know that we could keep talking because there's so much ground that we have left completely uncovered. So I invite everyone who's here with us tonight to use the Q&A box if you would like to submit a question, and we will very happily answer. If you would like to remain anonymous, there is a box that you can check and it'll leave out your name. And please feel welcome to do so. You can also use the chat and you could send us a message directly. And we're very happy to answer your questions. But I will take the lead and I will ask a question. Because one of the reasons that I love Jagged Edge so much was exactly your representation of complex mental health issues that all the characters are dealing with. And I mean, I will admit that I'm not a huge reader of the romance genre, but that is the last thing that I would have expected.
As we said last week, neither was she until I pushed her into it.
Right? So when you get relatable and complex characters that are dealing with things that, you know, you yourself are dealing with, and it's a great book, you know, it really means a lot. So anyways, what my question is, and do you think it's important, and why is it important to include characters with mental health issues in the books and the stories that we read?
Well, like I said before, that, you know, for understanding, for compassion, for patience, right? We can't know what other people are experiencing. We don't walk in their shoes. So if we can include experiences that enlighten others so that they aren't quick to judge, so they understand, so that they can, in that moment, offer the compassion that and understanding that is needed, then I think it's crucial.
I would also add that as part of the genre, and like Cindy said, I was not a reader of contemporary romance, erotica, anything like that. I thought it was laughable until I started reading it, and I'm like, okay, it's actually kind of good.
There are certain authors that
right.
she had to get to, because as I said before, I've been reading in the genre since I was a teenager, and you know, my tastes, you know, evolved over those years, and I discovered lots of different writers, and I had my favorites and ones that I, you know, read one book and didn't go back to. So it took a bit of time until she found the authors that she found to be
engaging, more interesting
and impressive, and worthy of her time.
But I think that one of the things that we did discover, both of us, and upon writing this, getting together to be able to write this, you know, you have to give your characters a motivation. There has to be an impetus for them to move forward, at least with the plot, with respect to a plot. And I don't think, and between us, we've read hundreds of these types of novels. I can't recall any of them that dealt with mental health issues. Oh, there was the damsel in distress because she was being chased by the mob. There was one who was, I don't know, being, assaulted by her professor.
Kidnapped for
ransom, and the struggling actress. Those ones are replete throughout the genre, but nothing tackled mental health issues, especially where it was important for the character himself or herself, and in our case, both of themselves, to seek out help for that, and not necessarily help from each other, but external help as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And I mean, I think I shared with both of you while I was reading, especially the first time, I was Team Lily all the way. And whenever I would sense that growth from her in my comments, I'd be like, yay, Lily, go Lily. And by the end, you really, really feel that. So it was so great to see. And then it also comes from writer's end. And I love that it doesn't fall into the trope of a woman needs a man in order for her to be okay. Like, they're just both very independent and they don't need each other. They just want each other.
Well, I think we tried really hard to make sure that Lily's growth and development and acceptance of herself was not simply because she met Ryder. It was because of herself, because of her hard work, because of...
But it did give her the strength to
the support,
want
the
to
love,
seek out,
the
to want to
understanding.
seek out an answer.
Right. He was a support to her, but her growth wasn't dependent like solely on meeting him.
Right. Varahi had a really interesting question.
I can't read from here without my glasses. Go ahead, read it.
So
can I just add something quickly?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think it's important to write or mention mental health, just because it's such an important part of our lives, and 25% of the population have mental health diagnosis. So every fourth person, at least once in their lifetime, will be diagnosed with something. If they're lucky to get diagnosis, sometimes they don't. So that's the statistic that we have right now. And I think it's a lot more than we realize. And I think writing about it makes us understand that it's very human. Our body gets sick, and our mental health also matters a lot. So I really appreciate that you
but as and as Edith just pointed out, it's reality. It's not fantasy. This is real, and
it's the reality that helps the fantasy be believable.
Definitely.
And we have two really great questions. So as you mentioned, Varahi had a great one. She says, I had a question for Cindy. How did you know when you were ready to talk about your condition with BDD?
When I felt safe. So I first started to feel that way with my husband. He accepted me for who I am and never judged me. And even though he might not have understood or identified the term BDD, he knew what I was experiencing, gave me the space to work through my bad days or my bad moments, didn't judge me, made me feel like there was nothing wrong with me for having those moments. But I didn't actually start openly talking about it, freely talking about it without feeling bad about myself outside of my husband until we started writing this book. It really was, like I said, very cathartic for me. It was 40 some odd years of things bottled up, feelings and thoughts and emotions and guilt bottled up that finally came out.
And I think that is why our glasses look like this.
Oh, well, hold on.
There you go. I need another one. All
right, is there another question?
There is, from Nikki. Hi, Nikki. So hi there. First of all, loving your cocktail series. Thank you, darling.
Thank you.
I also love that your book deals with mental health in relation to love. What are your thoughts on finding love while battling mental health? Do you believe that the person should seek help or try to resolve their issues before finding a partner, or do you believe a person can do both simultaneously? Wow, I think those are really important concepts.
So for me, it was the strength and support and love and non-judgment that I got from my husband that gave me the strength to move forward and accept my issues and confront them and talk about them.
And for me, I think I've had my issues for a really, really long time. And it wasn't something that was diagnosed until a lot more recently. So I went through a lot of struggles with family and with my husband as well, in not being able to understand what I was experiencing and to get them to believe me that what I was experiencing was so real, even though it seemed so far-fetched.
It's the acknowledgement that even though they don't feel what we feel, or maybe even understand what we feel, they still respect what we say we're feeling,
that's what it was.
And not negate that.
Right. And once I got my family and my husband on my side, essentially, to believe that these were issues, I could help them understand better. I got to understand better what my issues were, but I found the support at that point so much more helpful and empowering. So in terms of trying to seek out issues. I think that's really subjective, and it depends on the person. If you are insular, if you are private, if you want to tackle something like this alone, whatever works for you. But with all due respect, I think having the support of someone, a team of people, even if it's just one person, your husband, your mother, friend, your best friend,
sibling,
it's that much more integral to even a potential for recovery.
I just want to add one last thing.
Yana, I wanted to ask you what you think about this.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to say that this question also makes me think of like where it can come from, and sometimes we think that we can only be loved or be in a relationship conditionally under certain condition if we're beautiful, or if we're in good shape, or if we're in a good physical or mental shape, right? But we all deserve and entitled to be loved unconditionally. I understand that it does not always happen. It's not always a reality for everyone, but that's what we are entitled to. And we do need the support, like you mentioned, both of you. We all do, no matter whether we struggle with mental health or not, we still need support. And it's okay. And it's okay. We all need each other. And I don't think that it's fair to only say that those who don't struggle with mental health, or I'm sorry for bringing this up, but we can also categorize people on wheelchairs there as well. Then okay, well, you're on a wheelchair, then well, maybe when you get better, then maybe you can seek relation. But it's not true. We all are entitled to have each other.
It's funny that you said that, because so my mother was physically challenged. It's a very long story, which I'll not get into right now, but she got very sick when she was 30 years old and ended up having emergency brain surgery that left her paralyzed down one side. And a few years after that, my parents got divorced, and my mother remained single for the rest of her life because she believed, she didn't even seek out relationships with other men, because she kept saying, well, look at me. Like, who would want me when they could have that or that or that? So yes, I agree with what you're saying, 100%.
Although I will say that people in wheelchairs do get much better parking spots.
Oh, what great questions and such incredible answers. And we're right at 8, and I hate to cut this short because, again, I feel like we could keep going. But I feel like this question was also a really great segue to next week's session, where we talk about long-term relationships an hour after the honeymoon session, and kind of how we can sustain those happy long-term relationships way after that honeymoon phase in the beginning. But even before we get to next week, I just want to say thank you so much to the three of you. This hour went by in the blink of an eye.
Thank you, Yana.
Yeah,
Yana, Tally,
Yes.
and then to all of
Tally.
you that attended,
Yes,
and
we really
participated.
appreciate it.
We do. That's the support we're talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you all for being here, to Tamara and Cindy for being so open and vulnerable and in sharing your experiences. Yana, for sharing your professional expertise and really kind of rounding out this entire book for me. It's opened up so many different ways of thinking about it. And also, I just have to say, I love this book. I think it's clear that I love this book, but with each of these sessions, I love it even more. So
I think I might have to go back and reread it.
I might too. So this is a shameless, well, not so, no, it's a shameless plug. Everyone get this book. It is phenomenal. There's so many different ways to read it and enjoy it, and for so many different purposes. Again, we'll send out the link where you can pre-order it. We'll be launching it on December 18th, where we will have a virtual launch. We will gather on Zoom once again to celebrate this book. And even earlier than that, next week, we have our third and final cocktail session. One more delicious cocktail that we will be making.
It's a good one.
It's a really good one. We'll be talking about relationships, and it promises to be another really great time. So thank you all, and have a wonderful rest of the night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.